think is true. You know, the proponents of 594 say that this initiative would diminish crime. I think the truth is precisely the opposite. It will increase crime. It will increase crime for the law-abiding, respectful gun owners who find themselves enmeshed in 15 pages of new crimes that you can commit merely by touching a firearm that you have not purchased after a background check. And I'll go through some of the details of this in a minute. Sometimes we hear prosecutors or others say, well, you know, your interpretation is unreasonable, and no prosecutor would prosecute a crime that is unreasonable. Believe me, my friends, after 15 years on the Washington State Supreme Court, I think I understand the mentality of many prosecutors. They are there to prosecute you, and they will prosecute you for as many crimes as they can put on the list. That's what it's all about. Another thing I learned over the 15 years that I was on the Washington State Supreme Court, that there are criminals out there. They do terrible things, they do evil things, they do stupid things. But I don't think I ever saw a criminal case before the Washington State Supreme Court where any criminal would be so stupid as to apply for a background check that he knows he's going to flunk. You don't have to be Hannibal Lecter to understand this. So is it going to stop any crime, any armed crime? I don't think so. If you're a real criminal, you're not worried about complying with background checks. You're worried about getting the firearm so that you can make use of it in a way that's practical for you, and that's exactly what they'll do. You know, some people say, well, 594 is ambiguous. We don't really know what it means. I would disagree. I think we do know what it means. You read it and you know what it means. I had sort of a radical attitude when I was on the state Supreme Court. When I interpreted a statute, I wanted to begin by reading the statute. You know, we don't need to decide the case to find out what's in the statute. We need to find out what's in the statute before we decide the case. And the same thing with the Constitution. We start by reading it. This is not rocket science. Anybody in this audience or beyond can simply read it. Who wants to read 15 pages of all this stuff? But it's there to be read. You know, when I say that it creates a lot of crimes, I'll go through some of those in a minute. But I had an eye-opening experience about 14 years ago. I went to Russia. I went to a small town near the Arctic Circle named Ukhta. Ukhta was the capital of the Gulag in that area of the former Soviet Union. And they had a museum in Ukhta. It was the Gulag Museum. And I went through the museum, and they had an exhibit of the 1936 Soviet Criminal Code. You know, up to that point, I thought that the Soviets didn't give people fair trials, and that the guy didn't have his day in court. But this really explained to me why I was wrong. Because in the 1936 Criminal Code, almost everything was a criminal act. Envy of Western technology is a crime that could have you sent to the Gulag. And this gentleman over here, hey, I like your Swiss watch. Envy of Western technology. I mean, you're guilty, my friend. The only question is the prosecutor going to prosecute you? And that's the way it is with 594. That's the issue. Is the prosecutor going to prosecute you? And believe me, if the prosecutor is diligent and zealous like Dan Satterberg or the others that you see on TV, you're going to be prosecuted, especially if they don't like you. If you're wearing your NRA cap, if you have camouflage on, if you start spouting off about your constitutional rights. You're the kind of guy that needs to be prosecuted. And believe me, when you get to court, when you get to the Supreme Court, if I were on the court, I would affirm that conviction, because you did commit a crime. It's a stupid crime, but you committed a crime, and we so-called conservatives weren't going to judge the rationale behind the crime. We're going to defer to the legislature or the people through their initiative process to tell us what the crimes are. So, the People who advocate background checks usually characterize this in terms of a sale of a weapon. That you can go to a gun show and you can buy a weapon without a background check. Now, I've been to several gun shows. It's always been my experience that that's not true, because in order to buy any weapon in the gun show, at least the Washington Arms Collectors, you have to have survived a background check already. But the real point of all this is not so much sales, it's transfers. The initiative defines transfer as the intended delivery of a firearm to another person without consideration of payment or promise of payment, including but not limited to gifts and loans. Gifts and loans. So you don't have to buy a weapon to be subject to this initiative. Basically, the structure of the initiative is to say, if you touch a firearm that you don't have after you've survived a background check, you are guilty of a gross misdemeanor with some exceptions. And the exceptions are very narrowly written in this initiative. For example, there is an exception for a transfer to an immediate family member without a background check. And it says, it shall be limited to spouses, domestic partners, parents, children, siblings, grandparents, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, first cousins, aunts, and uncles. That is a bona fide gift. Okay? You loan your firearm at a range to your sister-in-law so that she can shoot at a target. That is, number one, your sister-in-law is not on the list. Okay? That's illegal. The second way it's illegal is that it was a loan, it wasn't a bona fide gift. Now this amazes me. I wish that Bill Gates Jr. were here to explain this to me. Why is it that I can give my mother a firearm, but I can't loan her a firearm? Why is that? Why is it that I can give my mother a firearm, but I can't sell my mother a firearm? Now, probably Bill Gates is not worried about selling anything. But the other of us don't parade around downtown surrounded by armed guards and lecturing people about the evils of firearms. All right, you're walking downtown with your wife. You've seen these pictures on the news sometimes where guys are making a sport out of this. They jump out of the shadows and they clobber somebody, hit them as hard as they can on the head, knock them down, knock them out. Okay? So I'm walking down the sidewalk and I have an arm, and I'm armed, but the husband and wife are walking down the sidewalk. She gets clobbered. She's on the sidewalk. I want to loan the gun to her husband so that he can try to protect his wife and his family members as best he can. Guess what, my friends? This is a gross misdemeanor for me to hand it to him or for him to receive it. Because the statute says it's exempt. A temporary transfer of possession of a firearm if such transfer is necessary to prevent the imminent death or great bodily harm to the person to whom the firearm is transferred. Your wife's on the ground. She's knocked out cold. I can give her the weapon. That's going to do her a lot of good. And believe me, this is, I don't believe that this initiative was written this way because of bad lawyering. I think that they paid their lawyers a lot of money to make it just as difficult for gun owners as they possibly could. This is intentional. Another claim is that, well, you know, you can go to the range, borrow your buddy's gun on the range, and return it to him when you're done shooting skeet or whatever. And that is not a violation of the initiative. What it says is, the exemption is, if the temporary transfer occurs and the firearm is kept at all times at an established shooting range authorized by the governing body of the jurisdiction in which such range is located. To give you an example, I live over on Vashon Island. I don't have a shotgun. A buddy of mine said, why don't you come out to the sportsman club? We shoot skeet at 10 a.m. on Sundays. I said, well, I don't have a shotgun. He says, that's okay, I'll loan you mine. Gross misdemeanor, because that gun has not stayed at all times on the range. It's not a range gun, it's somebody else's gun. Or if you take your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend out to the range, you loan him your gun. That is a gross misdemeanor. How does it make any sense? How does this make any sense? It does make sense if you're just opposed to firearms. If you just want to harass lawful citizens, honest, reasonable citizens in their use of their firearm. There's an exemption for hunting, but that exemption is limited to all where it is legal in all places where the person whom the firearm is transferred possesses a firearm. So you go hunting. Loan your firearm to your buddy. He walks across the street. You can't go hunting on a public street. Gross misdemeanor. You know, at the end of the day, faced with this litany of ways you can commit crimes, there's a lot of people who are just going to say, hey, I don't want to do it. I don't want to take the chance. It's not worth it. Forget it. And you know, that is the real intention behind 594, is to take your guns away, to make it so hard for you to possess them that you run a terrible risk of being a criminal. And the first time is a gross misdemeanor, the second time is a Class C felony. Is it going to stop crime? No. Is it going to promote crime? Yes. You know, there's one other initiative that I've heard some controversy about, and that's 591. 591 essentially preserves the status quo. It says the state of Washington incorporates federal law when it comes to the use or when it comes to background checks. I think 591 is the last best hope to beat back 594 because it is absolutely inconsistent with 594. And if the people of this state go out there and bow to the will of the plutocrats, the billionaires who want to buy this election, and they pass 594, the only hope of stopping this thing in the courts is 591, because they're contradictory, and it gets to the courts. I wish the courts were doing better than they are, but there's still a hope that maybe it could be stopped on the home track if both of them pass. So, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.